what advice would you give them? How would you steer them? Obviously, the world's changed a lot in 20 years, but what kind of advice do you give them?
Yeah, there's a piece of advice that I wish someone would have given me
Hmm.
at 29 when I started to break into the horror film thing and I started to get a lot of calls. But I was also simultaneously working in the like the CCM Christian music scene in Nashville too, getting asked to arrange and produce and play on those records. So I was kind of holding these two worlds because I just needed to make a living. I was just scratching and clawing trying to pay
Horror
bills.
music and CCM music.
It's awesome. Is it
Somehow, look, I know both worlds, and somehow that makes sense to me.
well, it's just that dichotomy is amazing, isn't it? But I was just trying to make a living, right?
Right.
So I'm just like, I'm gonna try to do everything and just see what sticks. Okay. The point being though, was that I had just done a horror film in LA, my first one. I did it well. They liked me. But I was also contracted to arrange and produce a record for the
Hmm.
CCM world.
Yeah.
And this was a big job. The money was fine. The money was good enough. But then the horror company called me with the next installment of the Puppet Master series. And the Puppet Master series, hey, that's a real honest to goodness horror franchise.
Yeah.
And I turned it down
Hmm.
because I was too busy. I couldn't make it work. And that was the biggest mistake of my career.
Hmm.
And I wish someone would have said, Jared, anyone can do the CCM record. You can subcontract that out. And I'm telling you, you can hire anybody in this
Yeah.
town. They're going to manage it and go do the horror film. You need to focus on the big goal. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say that to anybody, whatever your job is within this film music industry, is take the work and figure out how to do it.
Right.
Subcontract it out, build a team of people below you, even if they're not like, say, your employees,
Yeah.
they're at least people that you know and really trust that you vetted, that if you get busy, you can farm it to them and they're going to do a great job,
Yeah.
you know?
Is the advice then don't say no to anything?
Well,
Or is the, because like when you're 25 starting out, it's like you maybe you don't know your true north or your true destination, right?
oh yeah, you say yes. I mean, at 25, you
I
say
mean,
yes to everything. I believe that. You say yes to everything.
mhm.
And at 29, I should have said yes to everything. But in my mind, I was one person that had a finite amount of time, that could only
Right.
do a finite amount of work. I wasn't thinking about myself as a business, so to
Yeah.
speak. I wasn't, and I just wasn't thinking, you know?
Right. You're working in your business, not on your business, as they say.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, at that age, at 25, of course, I'd say you say yes to everything. Now, as you get
Yeah.
older, I do say no to things. There are things that I kind of have this saying of like, I want to now at this phase of my life, if it's a baseball analogy of like, if you hit the baseball on the right part of the bat, the ball is going out of the park.
Hmm.
But if you hit it on the wrong part of the bat, it's just a weak grounder. And I need to do things in my life now where I am hitting it always on the good part of the bat.
Yeah.
You know, that's just my time is limited. Anything I do, if it's a friendship or if it's a volunteer thing, it needs to be a sweet spot that I can crush,
Right. You want to set yourself up for success.
sex. Yes, in whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And so I'm quicker to say, this is not a great fit for me, but I can
Hmm.
probably tell you someone that might be,
Yeah.
you know.
And what are some of those things that you would potentially say no to?
Well,
Like,
certainly if I
it's
realize I'm a tool, you know what I
right.
mean, and not a team member, um, unless there's a gaping hole in my schedule and it makes sense that I just need to be a tool and suck it up, I guess I'll
Mhm.
be a tool. But if it's just normal workflow, I might just say, you know what? I just know this isn't going to be good for me. It's not good for my wife. It's not good for my kids. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so that's normally it. What would be the no is just to know how I'll be viewed within the whole process.
So it's more like a team role. It's
Yeah,
not really an ability or a capacity role. It's
yeah,
like
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not really an ability thing. I certainly now, no offense to CCM, but I would never take that work. It doesn't interest me. And I
yeah.
realized very quickly that, because I mean, the funny thing with CCM work was everything I did would get canned by the producer. It was too risky. It was too aggressive. It was,
Yeah.
we don't do that. And so I've also realized that if a piece of music came, or a project came my way and I realized it was so creatively stifling and so vanilla,
Right.
I'd probably be like, I'm not the guy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. We're the same way. It's like, if it's disposable music, we're not the right
I'm
people
not the
for
right
you.
guy.
It's,
There's so many
there's,
disposable music
yeah.
composers. You
Yeah.
can find them, and more power to them. And I kind of am jealous of the people that can do disposable music. Sometimes I wish I didn't care so much,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
but I do.
So what else for a 23-year-old female scoring composer? What other advice would you give them? You said, don't say no to anything. That was a big one.
Yeah.
What else? What other advice could you?
Um, I think, I think, understanding like story, power of story, the role
Mm,
of story. I think coming to grips that this project is not all about you, the composer. It's not, you're not here to glorify yourself. You're a support role,
mhm,
but you can have an artistic statement amidst being a support role. You know what I
mhm.
mean? You can satisfy both, but always remember the story comes first. And so I don't really care that you wrote this amazing fugue or have this amazing classical technique that you've worked in here to the scene. If it's not working, it's not working. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say to anybody on any level of whether it's a composer or the music supervisor is understand story,
Mm,
understand why something works. Look at the movies you like, the scenes that you like, whether it was the use of a pop track, um, like in the new Top Gun Maverick movie where they use pop music and it's so good. Why do I
right.
like this? What's the tempo? What's the pacing? What's it make me feel? Why is it working? The
Yeah.
score, why is this working? Really have an arsenal of stuff that you can draw upon so that when you're faced with a scene and as a supervisor and you're like, well, what kind of pop track am I looking for? You can think back to this library in your head of, I remember how I felt when I saw that movie. Why does that track work so well?
Mhm.
And then it would help you interface with artists to know exactly what you're looking for. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I
And
love
not
that.
wasting artists' time, whether they're trying to write a song for your movie. And now you've got, at least you've got some guardrails over what you're looking for because you've got this database in your head of what you like and what works.
Yeah. I love that. So, Jared, going back to the work process, walk us through kind of a high level overview of what that looks like
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. And so, like I said, the way everybody kind of needs to find their own work process and how it
Yeah.
takes time. I have a couple of mentors that I've had for many years, composers, arrangers, orchestrators. One of them's here in town. His name is Carl Marsh, and he's arranged everything. I mean, my goodness, his credentials are amazing, but he's mentored me for 25 years. And I remember bringing him a theme I was working on for a show. And I said, hey, man, I could really just use your eyes on this. Do you have anything you could offer me to just help me look at it different?
Mhm.
And he gave me that term, play in the sandbox. And he's said, and that's when he said, Jared, you just really need to play in the sandbox on this. You need to take the pressure off yourself and just play around with the theme and have fun with it, do different things with it, see what you can do with it. Take the car out for a test drive, so to speak.
Mm,
But under sort of without the burden of attaching it to a scene.
right.
Just let's just write some music with this. You know what I
Play.
mean? Play around.
Mm,
And that meeting I had with him really changed everything for me and how I work. And now I sort of build in this play in the sandbox time
mm,
for me in the score. And that's kind of become part of when you work with me, you understand I've got some sandbox time, you
mhm.
know? And so now rather than just writing a scene and sending it off to the director and then writing the next scene, sending it off for approval, right? That's the way I used to do is like boom,
Yeah, yeah.
boom,
You
boom,
start.
boom,
You're starting the project.
starting.
Right.
Now what I do is I kind of take the first act as a whole and
Yeah.
I'll write this and then I'll go write this and I'm not showing anybody
Yeah.
and I'm writing this and then I'll listen to it all down and I'll see, well, how does this flow? How is this revealing the story? And I'll change this and I'll change that. You know what I mean? And then I'll go, okay, I have a really good first act.
Yeah.
I'm going to show the director the first act. And then it just feels like you can watch 15 to 20 minutes or listen to it and you go, ah, this makes sense.
Hmm.
Because I had time to play in the sandbox,
Yeah.
you know?
That's brilliant. So that play time, the sandbox time, that kind of takes the pressure off. You're not really working. You're just kind of putzing
Right,
around, trying things, experimenting, seeing where the surprises are,
right. All of that.
indulging yourself, trying some things, throwing
Yeah,
stuff against the wall.
right. And really being
Hmm.
okay. Because like yesterday, very little music was written yesterday. But I played around for 8 hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
And my wife always, she's so good. My wife always talks me off the ledge. She's like, Jared, this is sandbox time. You're
Mm.
okay. This is what you do,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but it's so important because you might find, and you always do find, you find the little thing that
Yeah.
goes, aha,
That's it.
that's it. And I think that's
Yeah.
what, unfortunately, I think that is getting lost. When we talk about
Mm.
things that are getting lost, the apprenticeships, the scratch and claw,
Yeah.
we're learning about, I think what we're forgetting is it takes time to find something of value,
Right.
whether that's making a record and finding the right drum part or the guitar part or getting the right vocal take. Sometimes things take hours
Mm.
to find. And I can always hear when I can always hear when someone, I'm like, well, that seems like the first thing you thought of, and you didn't have the time, you didn't spend the time to iterate it, to make it better.
Yeah.
You didn't use it to build off of, well, what's the next best thing I can do. I mean, I always used to have this thing in the studio as a guitar player where I would be like, okay, that was a good take, I'm going to try to beat it. I'm going to try to beat it. I always try to beat the take. And once I couldn't
Mhm.
beat the take, then that's the take. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And that's sort of me with writing, of like, okay, that's cool. Can I beat it? Can I beat it? And I think we live in such an instant gratification culture that they don't have the time. They're not affording, they haven't learned how to
Yeah.
grind 8 hours out for maybe 10 seconds of music, but that 10 seconds is the gold that's going to
Yes.
propel you for
Yeah.
the rest of the thing.
Yeah. 100%. It's more like transactional rather than transformational.
Yeah.
It's not just about doing the job. It's about creating the thing that makes people feel like they're flying,
Oh,
lifts
yeah.
them off the ground and kind of like connects to that thing in humans that makes people care,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know?
yeah. I mean, it's the drum sound that you'll hear. Oh my gosh, they took 20 hours to get that snare drum. But
Right.
you're like, that's a great record. And
Right.
we keep listening to that record. Or, the iconic sound from like Hellraiser, when that sound of the box, you're like, you know what? That sound didn't get written in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That was
The sound of George Lucas's TIE fighters with the screaming tiger. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
like, that sound designer had to play around forever to get that. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
look what the sound of the lightsaber has become, one of the most iconic sounds, because they didn't take the cheap way out,
Right.
you
They
know?
kept the bar high. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Jared, when you talk about the sandbox, how much of that shows up in the actual project?
Yeah.
20% of that, 50% of that?
Yeah, for me, maybe 50% of it does,
Okay.
maybe half of it. Sometimes I have
Yeah.
sometimes I get these amazing surprises where I'll write something, 10, 15 bars, 20 bars, and I'll go, you know what? I'm just going to throw this over the scene. Let's just, let's just see. And you're like, wow, I cannot believe that works.
Mm.
Those are the most, and maybe you're like, well, I got to add a bar, I got to add a beat to hit a time,
Sure.
but you're like, I can't believe this works. This is so good.
Mm.
And those are those happy moments of your life where it's just everything is just like, oh, this is so worth it. I love this job. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So yeah, I'd say half of it,
Yeah.
but the other half is just so important for development because you learn something about the music that you can do with it, of which I would use to then, because when music school wrapped up and I like, well, now what? Which is probably the question most every kid asks themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I decided to apply to USC out in LA, and I used that reel, and I got in. I mean, I was amazed. I couldn't believe I
Mm.
got into USC, and that reel was, a huge reason why. Ultimately, right at the last minute is when I got offered to become a ghostwriter for Joseph LaDuca, and
Mm.
kind of like, it's not right, but it's like an apprentice, so to be one of his guys.
Yeah.
And that reel helped because he could
Right.
see that
The-
I could write a lot
the
of
Colonel.
styles. What's that?
The Colonel.
Yeah. Yeah, he could see, hey, here's a kid that knows the gear. He can write a lot. He can clearly work fast. He's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's worth, taking a risk on. So that's
Yeah.
kind of, it wasn't like I was scoring anything, but in my head I was, and that was the music that he heard that he decided to give me a shot with.
Yeah. And what was that apprenticeship like for you? Would that look like?
It was awesome and exhilarating, but it was a grind. I mean, it was 80 to 120 hours a week.
Hmm.
I still have the logs, my calendars from that time together, because it was just so ridiculous where I would write down every day what I did.
Yeah.
So, he's the composer that started with Sam Raimi on all the Evil Dead stuff. And so I was
I
already
didn't know that.
yeah, so I was a horror film fanatic as a kid.
Mm.
And so then to go to work for him, I felt like I was working for someone who was really great in that genre. And he's
Right.
great in a lot of other genres. So it was just really exciting because I knew his work already, you
Yeah.
know? And so that apprenticeship was sort of like, it started as a programmer, as an engineer. Then it was like, well, hey, can you play
And you were
on this
on site with him?
on site with
This
him?
was like pre-Zoom and pre.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, yeah. I mean, so I moved out and stayed in a friend's basement for months on end.
It's
And it
great.
was sort of like he gave me 2 weeks of work. He wanted me to reprogram a new synthesizer as a test to see if I could do it. And I
Right.
did it, and I did it well. And he was like, well, what if I give you this job? And it was some menial studio job. And I did it, and I did it well.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, well, hey, can you play on this White Castle spot? Another writer needs a guitar player. So I play on the spot. It was like, oh, wow, you didn't suck.
Right.
And then it was like, well, could you do that? And so, it's like bit
Yeah.
by bit, you get a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, then you're like one of the team. And then
Yeah. You're trusted.
Totally.
You're vetted.
Yeah.
You've figured it out. You've
Yeah.
landed on your feet.
Yeah.
half
And then
dozen
you're off
times.
and running. And
Yeah.
so then it was years of really being off and running, getting to work on a lot of fun shows, Xena and Hercules, which would go on to massive global success. And, I got to be a part of that stuff. So
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
awesome. It was
That's
awesome.
nice. So let's talk about apprenticeships
Yeah.
for a minute, because they seem to have internships kind of have made apprenticeships go by the wayside.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's the best. Like if a student really wants to learn and really is hungry and wants to prove him or herself, to me, the idea of working in the room with somebody on real world projects and not putting your foot in your mouth and not fumbling the ball is the absolute best way to show that you can figure it out and to be trusted.
Yeah. It's great.
Why do you think apprenticeships have kind of gone away?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. When you say that, do you differentiate between apprenticeship and internship? Do you look at them as two different buckets?
I mean, internship seems to be like, if I'm for a grade, I have to show up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna punch the clock. Whereas apprenticeship is like you're working on things with the person.
Yeah, I see
you're
what you're
working on
saying.
real projects.
Yeah.
Internships are like, okay, go clean the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that certainly, I think, has to do with a product of colleges and music schools now becoming so involved in the music industry and creating a curriculum that is arguably better or more relevant or whatever it might be. And they then lock these sort of like school related internships to studios. But for me, and what I grew up with, since I had to chart my own path. I had to cut down, I had to cut through all of it, and I had to want it. I mean, I always say I bled for it. I gave up everything. I mean, people, they don't know. I mean, I skipped lunches because it was pay the rent or eat. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pay the rent so I can hang in here. I can go without lunch.
Yeah.
Surely I can find some chips in the studio to munch on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
And I think that's gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
Where
you just scratch it out.
Yeah.
One way or another, you're going to figure it out.
I'm going to figure that. And I think that's what's been gone.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad, because you can tell there are such few people in any area of work that requires that scratch and claw that's being lost.
Yeah.